in the department of, but I had better not mention in what department. There is nothing in the world more readily moved to wrath than a department, a regiment, a government office, and in fact any sort of official body. Nikolai Gogol published this in 1842, and Fyodor Dostoevsky is often quoted, in one form or another, as having said that an entire generation of Russian writers came out from under Gogol's overcoat. Whether he said it exactly that way is actually disputed by scholars, but the sentiment holds up. This is the story that arguably invented modern literature's obsession with the invisible, overlooked, ordinary person. Its hero is a copying clerk nobody notices, in a government office that isn't even named, and by the end you'll understand exactly why that anonymity is the entire point. 3 names were offered to his mother for selection: Moki, Sossi, or the name of the martyr Hozdazat. No, thought the poor lady, they are all such names. They tried again: Trifili, Dula, Varahasi. What an infliction. Another page: Pavsikahi and Vahtisi. Well, I see, said the mother. It is clear that it is his fate. Since that is how it is, he had better be called after his father. This was how he came to be Akaky Akakyevitch. Even his name, the most basic marker of who a person is, wasn't chosen for him. It was arrived at by process of elimination, a coin flip dressed up as fate. Gogol spends an entire comic paragraph on this before the story even properly begins. And it's not just a joke, it's the thesis. Nothing about this man's identity was ever actively chosen by anyone, including, eventually, himself. No respect at all was shown him in the department. The young clerks jeered and made jokes at him and would scatter bits of paper on his head, calling them snow. Akaky Akakyevitch never answered a word, however. Only when the jokes were too unbearable would he bring out, "Leave me alone. Why do you insult me?" Domineering is the word Gogol uses for how his superiors treated him, meaning controlling through implied threat rather than open cruelty. But watch what happens next in the story, because it's the single most important sentence in it. One young clerk, new to the office, hears those words, "Leave me alone. Why do you insult me?" and suddenly stops mocking him entirely, hearing underneath them something like, "I am your brother." One moment of recognised humanity, in the middle of routine institutional cruelty. Gogol only gives you that moment once and never repeats it. It would be hard to find a man who lived in his work as did Akaky Akakyevitch. In it, in that copying, he found a varied and agreeable world of his own. There was a look of enjoyment on his face. Certain letters were favourites with him. This detail is doing more work than it looks like. A job that everyone else in the office treats as beneath contempt is to Akaky a source of genuine private joy, maybe the only one he has. Gogol is setting up exactly how little it will take to fill the rest of his life with meaning, which is exactly what happens the moment a new overcoat becomes necessary. "No, it can't be repaired. A wretched garment," said Petrovich the tailor. Wretched showed up back in the Kate Chopin episode 2, if you remember, for something close to misery. Here it's just an old coat, but the word choice isn't neutral. Gogol is quietly building toward making an overcoat feel like a matter of survival, not fashion. And he starts by making sure you register just how far gone this one already is. His whole existence had, in a sense, become fuller, as though he had married, as though some other person was present with him. And that companion was no other than the new overcoat, with its thick wadding and its strong, durable lining. This is genuinely touching and a little devastating at once. A man who has never had anything resembling companionship finds it finally in a coat he hasn't even finished paying for yet. Gogol isn't mocking him for this. He's showing you exactly how little affection it takes to fill a life that's been starved of it for decades. That whole day was for Akaky Akakyevitch the most triumphant and festive day in his life. If you've been paying attention to how these stories work, a sentence like that should make you nervous rather than happy. We've talked about dramatic irony a few times now in this series, and here it's doing something quieter than usual. You don't need inside knowledge the character lacks. You just need to have read enough Gogol or enough tragic fiction generally to know that the most triumphant day of his life is exactly the kind of sentence a story places right before taking everything away. "I say the overcoat is mine," said one of them in a voice like a clap of thunder, seizing him by the collar. A few minutes later, he came to himself and got onto his feet. But there was no one there. Even the aftermath refuses him dignity. The sentry who should help him, instead, assumes the robbers were his friends and does nothing. The institutions around Akaky Akakyevitch are just as indifferent to him as his colleagues were, which tells you his isolation was never really about individual cruelty. It's structural, built into every layer of the world he lives in. Do you know to whom you are speaking? Do you understand who I am? This mode of proceeding struck the general for some reason as taking a great liberty. This is Gogol's satire operating at full strength. The person of consequence, as he's called, isn't monstrous exactly. He's just constitutionally unable to process a lower status person asking for help as anything other than an insult to his rank. Akaky Akakyevitch goes home from that meeting and never fully recovers, and Gogol wants you to notice that what actually kills him isn't the robbery. It's being shouted at by a man protecting his own sense of importance. A creature had vanished and departed, whose cause no one had championed, who was dear to no one, of interest to no one, who never even attracted the attention of the student of natural history, though the latter does not disdain to fix a common fly upon a pin and look at him under the microscope. That's Gogol stating the entire thesis of the story outright, in case the previous few thousand words hadn't made it clear enough. A man can live an entire life, work every day, want things, love a coat, and vanish so completely that even a scientist studying insects would have paid him more attention. This is the sentence that made an entire generation of writers decide ordinary, overlooked people deserved to be written about seriously. Rumours were suddenly floating about Petersburg that a corpse had taken to appearing at night in the form of a clerk looking for a stolen overcoat, stripping from the shoulders of all passers-by, overcoats of all descriptions. And here Gogol does something genuinely strange. He turns a quiet tragedy into a ghost story. This isn't a betrayal of the realism that came before it. It's the same story, continuing past the point where realism runs out of options for delivering justice. Akaky Akakyevitch never got fairness in life. Gogol simply refuses to let death be the end of the account. Ah, so here you are at last. It's your overcoat I want. You refused to help me and abused me into the bargain. So now give me yours. The poor person of consequence very nearly died. He actually flung his overcoat off his shoulders as fast as he could. The most powerful man in the story, the one who couldn't be bothered to treat a clerk as human, spends one night as frightened and as powerless as Akaky Akakyevitch was every day of his working life. That's the whole of the justice this story is willing to offer. Not a trial, not compensation, just one night where the imbalance runs briefly, supernaturally, the other way. 4 words worth keeping. From this one: domineering, wretched, and the phrase person of consequence itself, which has become a small piece of shorthand in its own right for exactly this kind of self-important minor official. If you ever hear someone described that way, now you know where the phrase earns its edge. Next episode, we're going somewhere much shorter and sharper. Saki's The Open Window, maybe the tightest twist ending in this entire series. Subscribe so you don't miss it, and tell me in the comments, do you think the ghost story ending undercuts the tragedy or completes it?